Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be watching a video called Formula 1 F1 Cars Evolutions from 1950 to 2023. So I'm super excited to check this video out because I've seen some videos, some clips of like older races and like the earliest Formula 1 races and cars. And they looked like very particular. Like the car models were like so like, I don't even know how to describe it. They were like this tiny capsule kind of cars, but they look like so particular. They looked kind of adorable, to be honest, compared to the cars that we have these days that are incredible. Obviously, like they're very beautiful cars, but they're very different. Like when you look at them, you wouldn't even think it's the same sport just because they looked so like different. Like both cars, they couldn't even be more alike, like more different. I'm trying to think of like actually like what's similar between them. And from what I've seen, obviously not like a detailed sort of like model, but from what I've seen, it doesn't like, it's just like they're small. I think that's probably what they have in common. That seriously, like comparing like the earliest model to I think like probably the newest one is gonna be like, wait, what? I can't believe it's probably like, because it's been like 1950. That's what, 70 years. It's kind of insane that, you know, it has progressed like that far. So hopefully we're going to be seeing at like how the cars, you know, the progression of the cars and how and why probably it changed. Because I like, again, the other cars, I think from what I've seen, they were incredible. Like they were so adorable. They were beautiful. Maybe not that fast, but they looked like visually they were very pretty. So hopefully we're going to learn and we're going to know like actually like what made the cars, you know, change and stuff. So let's check it out and comment, like, subscribe, and start.
In this video, we are looking at the evolution of Formula 1 cars. The top level of motorsport is Formula 1, F1. It's one of the rare sports that transcends its niche audience and attracts a global following since it's the fastest and most technologically advanced racing series on the planet.
It's true, yeah.
It's true that Formula 1 has been around for nearly 70 years.
I love the cars.
Before we begin, please like the video, subscribe to my channel, and press the bell icon. The history of Formula 1. Although many innovative motorsports have come and gone, Formula 1 has endured. Accomplished in 1950, it is one of the world's oldest racing series and the most popular and lucrative type of car racing. Even more pivotal to the development of Formula 1 were the other races conducted in the 1930s.
Oh, the 1930s.
After World War II, the series moved to specially built racetracks, whereas in the 1930s racing was still done on public highways.
That's crazy.
Spectators needed to be shielded from the car's high speeds, and the show needed to improve without endangering the drivers.
Yeah, that's insane. No regulations at all.
The birth of F1, 1950-1959.
Okay,
in
1950,
years. Silverstone, England played host to the inaugural Formula 1 race,
love the
which
cars,
also took place on London's public streets. That
Public
same
streets?
year, the British Grand Prix hosted the inaugural Formula 1 World Championship race, which has continued annually since then.
Oh wow,
There
so
was
it's still
Grand Prix
going.
racing, the pinnacle of international competition, which took place on road courses until the 1930s. And there was Formula Libre racing, an open-wheeled form of competition that took place on a variety of surfaces. Even though there were also Formula 1 and Formula 2 races, Formula Libre competitions were the main attraction.
What's the difference
During
between Formula 2
F1's
and
formative years, British teams like BRM, Connaught, and Nigel Norman Racing
that car was
dominated the
beautiful.
sport. Many of the drivers were also of British descent. Formula 1 vehicles from this era also stood out in comparison to those of today.
Yeah, like the top is so large.
The cars of the era were also open-wheeled, but the engines were in front of the driver.
Oh, that's why that way so long, because that's where
1960-1969, big changes.
Oh my God,
Formula 1 changed dramatically from its first decade into the second, and the 1960s were the conclusion of an era in motorsports. A rise in racing deaths and a change in emphasis away from Europe both highlighted this decade.
Oh, okay, so
in the
they were even
60s,
safer.
there was an alarming increase in Formula 1 fatalities.
Okay, the other way around.
In the first decade of the series, only 2 drivers were killed. However, more than 30 drivers lost their life in the 1960s.
That's insane.
Because of the increasing number of deaths, the show's focus and priorities shifted significantly in 1968.
On safety, of course.
Johan Rindt was given the Formula 1 Drivers' Championship after his death in 1970. He was the first and only driver to receive this honor in this manner.
Yeah,
A new era in Formula One began in the same year, with the addition of the Constructors' Championship to the Drivers' Championship, which had been awarded annually since
car
1950.
looks so beautiful.
1970-1979.
See, okay, this is like a newer, similar to what
As the
we have these
1970s
days.
progressed, Formula One began to expand beyond its European roots and become a truly international sport.
Yeah, global.
Even while Britain continued to be the sports epicenter and the site of most events, several other countries started participating in the series during this decade.
That's really
Formula
interesting.
One cars with turbochargers were also introduced during this decade,
wheels,
ushering in a trend toward cleaner, more fuel-efficient engines that has persisted to the present day. There was a shift in Formula One's focus from the drivers and teams to the fans in the 2000s. This includes the use of on-board camera systems for broadcasting races and the advent of computerized timing and scoring systems.
To make it obviously more better, I think.
1980-1989, further innovations. Formula One entered its first really contemporary era in the 1980s.
Oh, what's a contemporary?
Formula One vehicles have become more aerodynamic and powerful thanks to the advent of carbon fiber chassis this decade.
Oh, because it's carbon.
There was an increase in the usage of sophisticated digital data systems
Everything's
and the development
digital.
of electronic traction
and
launch control systems. The 1980s also marked the start of Formula One's global expansion, which would continue throughout the 1990s and the 2000s.
Yeah, like these days.
In the 1980s, every continent with a significant human population hosted a Formula One event.
Significant human population.
Brazilian and Japanese Grand
like
Prix, as well as the return of the United States Grand Prix, which had not taken place there since 1960.
Okay,
the 1980s
like
saw
years.
a major shift in Formula One as the sport became increasingly commercialized.
A lot of
While
sponsors.
the majority of Grand Prix racing was still privately supported in the mid-1980s, a global economic downturn necessitated that teams explore alternative funding mechanisms.
Yeah, they ran out of money.
1990-1999, enter the new millennium. The 1990s were the beginning of the show's global presence, marking the end of its existence as a predominantly European-centric series. Another notable trend of the 1990s was the increase of corporate sponsorship in place of individual donors. In the 1990s, Bernie Ecclestone was instrumental in F1's expansion around the world, by facilitating the creation of new races in various parts of the world. Some entirely new circuits, like the Brazilian Autodromo de Interlagos, the Japanese Suzuka circuit, and the Canadian circuit Gilles Villeneuve, were also inaugurated during this decade.
Like different continents.
Many advancements in technology and safeguards were also introduced during this time period.
A lot of safety.
Semi-automatic transmissions, first utilized by the Ferrari team, electronic traction control, and grooved tires are just a few of the major innovations introduced to the championship this decade. 2000 onwards, the current state of the art.
See, like now the wheels are like the same size.
More dramatic shift in the 2000s than the 1990s.
More dramatic. Really?
In this decade, the series introduced new types of cars, expanded the types of teams that may participate, and modified its presentation style. For instance, at FanDuel Sportsbook, customers can wager on their preferred sporting event. The series made an effort to slow down and make things safer in the 2000s.
Oh, okay.
The year 2009 marked the debut of Kinetic Energy Recovery Systems, or KERS, marking the beginning of the hybrid era in Formula One.
What's hybrid?
The current Formula One logo debuted during this decade. It was the first redesign of the series branding since the 1980s. Lewis Hamilton,
took them a long time.
2008 World Drivers' Champion, drives the Mercedes F1 W05 Hybrid to victory. For the Bahrain, China, Malaysia, and Spain Grands Prix, the F1 icon drove a Mercedes F1 W05 Hybrid and won each race. Mercedes' F1 W05, the first car to use a hybrid powertrain, used a PU106A 1.6-litre V6 turbocharged hybrid engine.
It's just like the engine.
Only Mercedes, Ferrari, and Renault had hybrid engines that were up to the 2014 FIA standards. For the 2015 season, the output of the new engine was increased to 870 horsepower. Over-wheel winglets and wheel covers, previously used in F1 in 2009, were standard equipment for all cars in the 2022 season.
I love the little wings behind it. It looks like angel wings.
In the past, F1 cars' performance suffered because the spinning wheels disturbed the air around them. As a result of this phenomenon, F1 car performance dropped by as much as 46%.
Wow.
To address this issue, manufacturers have begun offering 18-inch tires with wheel winglets. In the world of auto racing, the old is often made new again. The Formula
Really? I
1
had no
World
idea.
Championship is a prime example. For decades, fans around the world have witnessed this renowned motorsport go through a seemingly endless cycle of change and growth, with nearly
It is
every
growing.
new season introducing its own set of subtle but
Okay,
significant
so many
regulation
people.
updates. Despite this, the Formula 1 Grand Prix continues to be one of the world's most difficult, fast-paced, and spectacular sporting events, so it's
That's the word,
instructive to
that's
trace its
spectacular.
history. Formula 1 has seen many transformations since its inception, and its potential future developments are intriguing to contemplate.
Yeah, like what's next?
This was the evolution of the Formula 1 cars. We hope you like the video.
Yeah, this is incredibly interesting. I think it really does, like, in the end, it really does, like, makes you think, like, what's next? Like, where do we go from here? Especially if you see, like, how it has evolved, like, throughout the years. They do mention, like, I think it was the 1980s, like, it was like the biggest change, I think, from the 80s to now. But I think probably the biggest, I would say, it's like from the 1960s upwards, because like technically the 70s, because they do mention that in the 60s, there were a lot of fatalities, a lot of like terrible things happen. And that's where they started to like get more regulations and stuff, like not the early 60s, but like the late 60s. I think that's where they started to realize, hey, I think we need to have like some regulations in place in order for the drivers to actually like drive safely, because otherwise, people are going to be dying left and right. So I think probably like from the 70s to like, I don't know, maybe 90s, I think there was like the biggest change. But they do mention it was like from the 80s. Maybe that's from like the sponsorship aspect of things and not the actual like car models. Because again, they also said that I think it was during that decade that it stopped being private. I think it was, it's kind of crazy to think like right now, because you see all those cars with like obviously they all have sponsors, obviously, because I don't think you could do this. You can't really build those cars without like huge companies sponsoring them. So it's crazy to me to think, wait, so it was like, I think kind of early in the sort of like in the sport, they didn't really have that. So it was just like private donors that were all just like, yeah, like, here's, take the money and like drive whatever. Like, it's kind of crazy to think these days like that was how it worked and how the sport worked like early in the early days. And not even early days, like for a bunch of years, like for like, I don't know, 30 years, 40 years. It's kind of crazy to think, especially like if you look at the state of like the modern era, it's like, wait, so earlier on, you just had like guys, and maybe, yeah, because it was private, not companies. So it was just like guys saying, yeah, like, here's $1 million. Go build the car that you want to. It's kind of insane to think, but it's like, well, society and economic collapse, changed and forces you out, and you have to like resort to having sponsors, which I think is normal like these days. It's crazy to me to think that you have like a patron that's like supporting like your endeavor in like building and into driving like this incredible car. But I do think what I was saying earlier on about like the cars being like very beautiful, like at the beginning of this, like of the 1950s, it was so like, I love the fact that they're so like, I don't know, like sleek and like round and pretty. Obviously, I think there's like several things they weren't safe at all, because I think they didn't really prioritize how safe for the driver, the cars were, and the newer car models obviously have that. I think because you're not open, I think that you're still like, you can still see kind of like the driver, but not really. Like on those earlier models, like the driver was almost like, you can see like everything was like, like if something happened, if you crashed, you were just there, you were just like flying up the air. Obviously, like the ones these days, I think you're more covered. And obviously, I think a big change was that now it's all carbon these days. Obviously, it makes cars safer, and it's not just like a piece of metal. So obviously there's that. But the others are like very, very pretty, I have to say. They're very beautiful. Not that the others, like the newer ones, are not, because they are very beautiful. But the others are like very special. They look obviously like very vintage. I love it. It's very pretty. I wonder if they have like some sort of like museum where they do have, I'm guessing they must have saved like a few of those like models, right? And not just that, because they just kind of like, I'm not on to my untrained eye, they sort of like all look very similar and they all look the same, but I'm guessing like from the 1950s, like there were a lot of models, and I'm wondering if they have like a museum that really does like show the progression of the cars up until like what we have these days. Obviously, it's all, I think the focus these days is now in aerodynamics, and because obviously it makes sense. So I think it's like they do prioritize two things, both like the safety of the driver and how aerodynamic the car actually is, because obviously you want to go like the fastest one. But it's funny also how they sort of like do tell you like these days they have like the whole like the wheel, it's basically like a tablet and like a computer. It's really funny to think of how it started with just like probably like a guy timing it, and now these days everything is just technology, and like you're driving in like an actual thing that looks like a computer. It's like straight out of the future. Imagine showing like a newer model of a car, of a Formula 1 car, like a 2023 model, to like the one they said like Lewis Hamilton like won in this special model. Imagine like showing that car to a driver from 1950. They would think like, wait, is this even like the same planet? It's insane because they don't really look that similar. So it's crazy to see it like that and illustrated like, oh, how it changed throughout the years. So yeah, it was incredibly interesting. That was exactly what I was sort of like thinking. I think that video is going to be like that, and I loved it. It was great. And yeah, that was it for today, and I'll see you soon. Bye.